configure themselves in the system. So MVC has defined a bunch of options. That's my start screen, everyone. No. There we go. Took a little second for it to resolve.
There you go.
All right, so here's some options. So configure, and then the options type that MVC uses. And then when I want to do something with those options, I get a lambda again that I can use to access the options. And if we look on the MVC options, this is where you will find things like, I want to configure global filters. Or I want to configure formatters, like in Web API, you had formatters. Or I want to configure my model binders. All those common concepts that you would, in the past, normally have like some static that you would, like global filters or global this, that, in MVC 5. Here, it's done through a dependency injection system. So it's, again, more testable, less dependency on statics. If you want to configure anything globally, you do it inside this options pattern. All right, I don't have anything I want to configure, but if I did, configure MVC options here. That's where I would do it. Okay.
Is that part of the larger generic configuration system?
It's certainly part of it. Like there's the configuration system. We can talk about that. Let's set up configuration real fast. So with configuration, there's just a configuration object. It's a very simple pattern. It's just a way to get named values from a set of config sources, like XML.
And before, with ASP.NET, there was angle brackets and web configs and configuration sections. And if you wanted to do something, a lot of people just wrote their own. They're like, I want to get it from this text file or that environment variable. But now it seems like we've made it very flexible where you can put configuration wherever you want.
Yep. Let me actually show you some of the convenient places we provide by default. I'm going to add another package to get configuration. It's under Microsoft Framework configuration. And then there's the core configuration model. And then I'm going to pull in the JSON package, which would pull in the JSON provider. And then there's the version. Let's kick off a package restore so we get the package. OK, so you just create a config object. And there's your configuration object. Configuration needs apparently a namespace. There it is. And let's look at what this guy's got on it. This is the core interface here for configuration. And you'll see it's got get and just takes a key.
Yeah. So
get me a value. It does also have a notion of setting a value and committing it. So you can actually even save the configuration data back to the configuration sources. It's basically just a simple way to get named values. And then you can configure a set of providers that it uses to find where those values are at. For example, I don't know, let's say you want to get add provider.
So when Hunter was talking about being cloud ready, the intent would be to make it so we could easily pull stuff out of Azure configuration if we're in an Azure website or out of an environment variable or whatever.
Yeah, so for if you're in an Azure website, so let's say locally during development, I'm going to do I don't know, config.json file.
Right.
I'm going to have a chunk of JSON that I set locally that I can.
Quote whatever.json.
Yeah. But if I want to do something that works better in a different environment, like in Azure. That might be convenient to do with add environment variables. Because Azure has this nice feature, where you can say add app settings in the portal. And they're just basically environment variables. And when you deploy your application into that environment, then you can just pick up the right configuration settings from the environment. And things just work. And that allows you to avoid all the complexities around config transforms, where you have a local web.config, but then you munge it before you deploy so that when it gets there, it has the right values. You can avoid that type of complexity by just saying, you know what? Get the values from the environment where I'm at, because the right value is already there. That's the key idea. So this is a simple way to do it. I've added two providers here, one for JSON file, one for environment variables. The way to think about them is they're basically stomping on each other. So I added the values from the JSON file, and then I add the values from
scoping.
It's
layers of scoping.
It's precedence in some sense.
Precedence,
so I would see the environment variables if they were there with a higher precedence than the JSON values.
Right.
So that's how you would add configuration to your system.
Cool.
And you can pass this guy around. You can then use it to populate options objects that you make available as services to your components. And there's infrastructure for doing that. Probably a topic for a more advanced session. All right, but that's configuration.
Okay.
We've got MVC. We've got some config. Let's run it. So I've got set up just a simple little home controller here. Nothing fancy. It's got a
derives from controller.
Derives from controller. I've also set up a little web API controller here.
Also derives from controller.
We'll get from that, yeah, because it's one system. There's just one controller. And then for views, we have a little home index view. It's rendering a form and printing out homepage. Let's see if this actually does anything. Does this work? So we'll run it. Pull up a page. This should go to an error.
So yeah, you have no config file.
I have no JSON config.json file. So let's just comment that out. You may see a config.json file in the starter web template, and that's because there is one there. And it gets added in the startup to the config object. All right, great. So we've got localhost. I've got a submit button. Looks like my editor 4 template isn't quite working, but we'll fix that in a second. But this is an MVC view that's being rendered from MVC and sitting on top of ASP.NET 5. And this can run both inside of IIS, outside of IIS. You can use the same trick that we showed before, where you set up a web command and run it from your own process. You can do that with MVC 6, and you're good to go. Just to show like a more full-fledged application. Like here's the starter web. This has all the bells and whistles, right? This has a Bootstrap enabled, and it has jQuery, and it's got an ASP.NET identity set up, so you can log in. This is a fully functioning MVC 6 application running on top of ASP.NET 5, just for comparison. Compared, slightly prettier than my little job here. Okay, well let's take a look at what's new in MVC 6 next. Like let's understand how do I do UI development with MVC 6? How can I leverage some of these dependency injection features? And then we'll talk about Web API afterwards.
Okay.
So next, we'll talk about Web UI and what's different. Is it different to build Web UI in MVC 6?
Well, because a lot of people are going to ask themselves, how hard is it going to be for me to move my MVC 5 stuff to MVC 6?
Yeah. Well, the good news is not much is different. Like it's basically the same. Like you see, it's a controller, and it has actions, and it returns action results. And you use that. There are some things that are different, and the places where it's different is where before it was touching like system web, like it was using ASP.NET routing. Well, now you're using middleware routing in ASP.NET 5. Those places will be different. Any place where you touch like HTTP context, well, you're going to be using the ASP.NET 5 context instead of the pre-existing ASP.NET context. But other than that, most of your code is actually should just compile as is untouched. If you go pick up an MVC 5 book and you're trying to learn how to code in ASP.NET MVC, you'll find that the concepts directly apply, because that's very intentional. It's literally intended to be the same framework that just was ported to work on top of the new ASP.NET 5 runtime. As a sort of case in point, we had an intern. Now, granted, our interns are very smart. We have very good interns, but we literally did give her an MVC 5 textbook and said, here, go learn MVC 6. And she was able to work with MVC 6 just fine using that content. So that's good news. Like the things that you got razor views, you got actions, the conventions about how the views are discovered, all the HTML helpers. It's all the same. None of that's really changed.
So it's cliche, but the term concept compatible really is legit.
Yeah.
It makes total sense.
The places where you'll end up doing migration are more around where it ends up touching the ASP.NET 5 runtime. There you'll have to do some code migration, but your controllers and actions, those should be mostly unchanged. Now there are some things that are different, though, that you can take advantage of. Like one of the big things that's different in MVC 6 is this use of dependency injection throughout the system. And let me try and show you a little bit about what I mean. So we saw the home controller, and this was working, but it derived from controller, and that seemed normal, and that was sort of what made a controller in MVC 5, right?
Right.
In MVC 6, that's not actually the case. Like I'm going to delete this. Let's just
no base class.
No base class. What's really making this a controller in MVC 6 is the fact that it just ends in controller. Now, I lost some of my nice helper methods. Like that Big C controller in MVC 6 is really about making some things easier for you, like wrapping some of the action results in little helper methods, making services, doing the dependency injection for you up front so you don't have to worry about it. But you don't have to do any of those things. So like,
how would you get view back?
Let's get some content back first. So let me return a new. Let's just return a new content result. I can just new one of these up, and let's give it some content like MVC still working.
So it is literally that the name of it ends in controller that makes it a controller?
Yeah. And let's comment this whole thing out. Okay, let's go here. and run this again. We should still hit that action. So it's still working. Like it got to that controller.
Yeah, routing's still there. Everything's the same.
How can that be? It's just we call these POCO controllers. Like a controller in MVC is literally just a type that happens to end in the name controller.
Plain old CLR object.
Now, if we go look at controller and what it's doing, like it has those helper methods, and it also is injecting services. Like let me add it back just so I can go F12 it real quick. Let's look at what's on controller. Like one thing you'll notice, okay, it has an action context property. That's the context for to call the action that was selected. If we look at that guy, it's got this interesting activate attribute on it. And that's because controllers in MVC are type activated using the DI system. And the action context is injected into the controller so that it's available to you. And you can do that as well. Like it's nothing special about Big C controller that it has an action context and it's using activate. You can do that on your own type. So let me show you an example. Like let me add a property here. Let's put activate on it. So public was action context, right? Yeah, and let's call it action context. Okay, so there's my action context. And oh yeah, then we gotta get rid of the base class.
I see. So you're saying I want one, and this will then do public property level dependency injection.
Yeah.
It'll inject an action context into that.
Just by default. And you, of course, can replace the system with your own IOC container, use your own patterns. But by default, you'll just get something that works. And you said you wanted the view back, right? So let's return the view. So that was a view result. All that view method does is create the view result and return it for you. Now, we're not returning content anymore. We actually want a view. So let's see, what do I got to do? Have a view name, right? Now, I could just say here, like, well, I want the index view. Well, that's kind of not very satisfying, right? Because that's the name of the method. I kind of want that just to work. So I can instead, let's get that action context, which has the action descriptor on it, and get the name of the action descriptor. And that's the name of the action that was actually called. So this is semantically equivalent to what was happening before. And let's see. I should now go back and I should see my rendered submit button view.
Dun, dun, dun.
There it is. Okay, so that's POCO controls. You can inject services onto your type. You don't need to use Big C control. You can, and it's convenient, but you don't have to. Same thing with web APIs, whether you're doing web APIs or web UI. And this is sort of a theme. Like a lot of what's new in MVC is that you can use injection, dependency injection, all over the place. Like let's say you have a model. Well, let me go back here. Let's look at this create method. Let's uncomment this again. So this is a method that's a post now, right? Actually, maybe I should put a post thing on it.
Right. Someone's filled something out, hit submit.
Hit submit.
Form posted the to-do item.
And I actually need to make my editor for to-do item. Oh, this is supposed to be. No, that's right. Isn't that right? Let me move it up. Maybe it's not high enough in the page. Okay. Let's see if I can get the. I want to see my form so I can submit something. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to do it with Fiddler.
So you're trying to, when you said editor for model, you're hoping to have it look at to-do item and give you some text boxes and stuff.
Yeah.
Which it ordinarily does.
It ordinarily does. What am I doing? Oh, maybe I need this @ sign here. I seem to recall that I need the @ sign. If the users online are seeing the error before I get to it, feel free to chime in.
It's live.
There it is. I was missing the @ sign.
We are live.
I'm not a human razor parser.
Still,
okay,
nice,
so I've got a form,
recovery.
and if I want to actually start debugging now. I'm going to put a breakpoint on the controller.
Okay.
And it looks like I need to put my Big C controller back so I can actually return view. It's convenient to do that.
Yeah, indeed.
And let's turn this back one as well. This is return view. And that's all that view helper method was doing was the same code that you saw before. Okay, and let's go in.
You can get rid of your action context because that one hides the other one.
Oh yeah. Okay, and so let's post something. Let's run this. I'm going to debugger.
Is this the same app?
Did I hit the wrong one? Let's debug the correct one.
Okay. So we're going to post some data from here and break, hopefully, right there on that controller.
So 1, 2, 3, and I don't know, like a haircut. Submit.
Did you debug?
I think I did.
Are you posting to the right location?
It doesn't appear to be. No, let me go back here. There was my action, submit, home, create.
Check your source code.
So this would go back. That's home create is right here. Maybe my action. Let's see. Let's just do
What's your source?
the source of
Just look at the source of the result right there.
yeah.
Form action. Action is null.
Action is null. This should come from the same.
It was like begin form didn't work.
Yeah. Using the form. Am I missing a paren?
You can just hard code it for now. This is a daily build of a daily build.
Like this?
I was thinking just actually hard code the entire form.
The higher form.
/home/create.
Like so?
That's what I'm thinking.
All right, we'll get this.
We shall see.
Where's my?
Pressure's on. We're living on the edge here, though, because we're using dailies and we're bringing down dailies.
I have a working version of it. I bet if I dipped it, I would recognize what I'm doing.
Of course.
Got an extra semicolon.
That's always fun. All right.
4 not found.
/home/create capital. Capital letters?
No.
You sure?
Routing something or other. Should be. Did I get this right?
Was it because we changed our routes?
Maybe.
Use the default route?
Who's this guy?
Sometimes people will look at this and they'll say, oh, this isn't working. What's going on? It's chaos. These guys don't know what they're doing. But at the same time, when you have little errors like this and things go wrong, you learn more. And hopefully you'll learn along with us as we figure out what's going on.
Let me switch to
Do me a
another
favor.
project. I got another project that.
May I make an observation?
Yeah.
You're doing a get rather than a post. So change your method
Oh.
on your hard-coded form. So there you go. There you go. Just a thought.
I think Big Get Form though does that for you, doesn't it?
I noticed that it was putting the details of your form in your URL, which makes it a get. There you go.
We got it. Whew, man. Okay. Great. So we got a to-do item.
Let's see if it actually bound this data.
So we bound some data. So that's normal. That was actually just getting normal MVC to work. So we got MVC working. That's good. That's good.
Sure.
So let's continue this. Now, what I want to do though is like sometimes you want to bind some other interesting stuff from the request, and maybe you actually want to do it on the model type.
Well, and just to be clear, to hover over to do there to make sure people understand what we're talking about is that we sucked out of the form post the values and reconstituted a to-do item, right? That's
right.
Model binding.
We took those fields from the form and model binding, figured out how to construct an object out of that. There's a bunch of value providers that took the named values and constructed an object. And that's one of the big value props of MVC is that nice rich binding from like form posts to strongly typed objects.
You're saying you can model bind from lots of other places.
We can bind all sorts of things now. So we see that. Let's take a look. So let me go to my, I'm going to stop debugging, and I'm going to go back to this to-do item type. I'm going to add some other stuff. Like, let's say I want to add a header value here.
Okay.
Like string Dan's header. So there are a set of from attributes that you can use. If you're familiar with Web API, this idea of a from attribute is not too unusual. Like you had from URI and from body were concepts in Web API. Those concepts are like from body, for example, is a concept in MVC 6 now. That's a way to say I'd like to bind data from the body, like from JSON XML. We'll get to that in a second when we talk about Web APIs. But you can also say I want a from header. And you can put this right on a property in your model type. And this will, now your model type is more than just the form.
From an HTTP header?
Yeah, an HTTP header.
And is that safe? Could someone put something naughty in there?
Well, it's the full request. Like there's a bunch of stuff in the request, and the stuff could come from the forum post. It could come from some JavaScript stuck a header on there, and it's as safe as the source of the original request. I mean, it's the same request coming from the same place. So just like you're binding stuff from your forum post, binding it to a header. Same
and were there rules about like excluding or including and being very explicit about where it comes from?
Yeah, so that's just that when you're defining your model types, you want to make sure that the set of things that you're exposing on your model types are things that you're okay with being accessible on the wire. Because the model binders will happily bind things by name to things here, and they'll serialize them out. So if you like have an entity from your database and it has like salary or is admin or stuff like that, and those weren't values you intended to put on the wire, you probably shouldn't use them as your model types that you're.
So that's why you have that view model separation, and you'd have view model in and view model out.
That's right. That's right.
I see.
Okay, let's see if we can get this to work. So I've added a header, and by convention it'll just be the name, just like everything else in model binding is done by name.
Okay.
Now to set a header, that's a little bit more work. So what I'm going to do is let's start the debugger again, and I'm going to pop up my favorite tool, which is Fiddler. If I can spell it right. There it is.
Okay.
All right, and let's construct a request. So post, and we want to go to that URI. What's the
slash
URI?
home slash.
We need this thing.
Yeah, slash home slash create.
Yeah, and we'll go to. Oh, and I just made my request method very interesting.
There we go.
All right, slash home slash create. And we don't need any except header. Host is fine. And let's say the content type is going to be form encoded data. So application form URL encoded. And then let's add a custom header. Dan's header. Ta-da. Okay, and then let's add some data in here, like what was it, like ID. Equal 1, 2, 3, and title equals test. Okay.
All right.
Execute. Looks like VS got hit a breakpoint. And if we go look in this to-do type, hopefully we see ta-da.
So then you've got model binding from the HTTP header of the post.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Similar if I put like from body on that model type, then that would mean that property would be bound using formatters like from JSON or XML.
And I assume that also, given all of this dependency injection, you could say something like maybe from service.
From services, I think is the.
From services.
Is it from service or from services? From services.
There's some, okay,
cool. So then you could put like iLogger factory here or some service that you're using and just inject.
And do all of these model binding things work with Web API within?
Everything's the same.
It's all the same.
Absolutely
really
the same. Yeah.
So go back to that home controller then. So then arguably, there's nothing about that says it's MVC or it's Web API other than the fact that it returns a view. I mean, if I return a JSON, it's the same thing.
That's right.
It's all very RESTful.
If you wanted from the same controller to have actions that are returning JSON and XML RESTfully and other actions that are returning views, that's totally doable. You can do that. If you prefer to keep them separate in separate controllers, that's fine as well. But the good news is that both controllers are sitting on top of exactly the same request pipeline. They use exactly the same filters. They'll use the exactly same model binders. They'll use all the same infrastructure under the covers is the same. So you can reuse those components now, whereas you couldn't before.
Okay.
So let's talk actually a little bit about Web API. So Web APIs, I have a Web API controller here, so you can do things like return an object, and that object will get formatted with a configured set of formatters. And just like in Web API, we have a formatter for JSON and XML. And we'll respond to the accept header using content negotiation to determine what gets serialized back. So we can hit this to-do controller real fast.
Okay.
You'll also notice that this controller is using attribute routing to determine its URI space. So I can set a base route on the controller, which in this case is just the name of the resource, to-dos.
Okay.
And then I can set the routes for each of the actions. And you'll notice that we allow you now to merge the verb and the route into a single attribute. Like before, you had to use a route attribute and specify the verb separately. It was HTTP and then route, whatever the route was. They're now merged into one single attribute. We did that because we observed that most other frameworks, they tend to couple the verb and the route together as one nice concept.
So looking at this code, I'm guessing just kind of intuitively that I'd say slash to-do slash a number, and it would constrain that to an integer for me automatically.
Yep.
It's very intuitive, and I don't have a routing table I have to worry about.
Yeah, let's see if we can actually get something. To do that, I'm actually going to
You could use a
use Chrome because
non-threatening competitive browser.
Yeah, non-threatening competitive browser. Mostly because Chrome sends an accept header with that says accepts XML,
Yeah.
which is nice to be able to render. So if I run this, what was it? To-dos, right?
Yep.
That should work. Do I get some?
/ID.
Oh yeah, thanks. And it has to be an integer, right?
Yep.
/ID would be 123, and there's some XML.
There you go.
If I do ABC, I should get that nasty page again. So it's working.
And because you're not putting in all the different error messages and stuff, because you have to opt into the middleware, you get a
very basic
error message. Yeah.
In that case, it was actually routing that was failing. There wasn't really an error. It was just like, well, there's no endpoint here.
Right. Okay.
So
because the routing said only accept this non-greedy route, this very specific route.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. That makes sense.
Now, one cool thing that's new in the way attribute routing works in MVC6 is it's kind of annoying that you have to repeat the name of the controller here. Like often you want the base route of the controller to just be the name of the controller.
Right.
So we have this new idea of they're called route tokens. They're special tokens that can be replaced by the system, and they're square brackets. So square brackets and square brackets. Look a little crazy, I know, but in the route, if you put square brackets, this is something that will be replaced by the system. So like if I say controller here,
I see.
and if I refactor my controller name, it will just automatically pick up the name of the controller. There's also one for action. Like if you put action in there, you could, if you were using like attribute routing in MVC, it would just put the name of the action inside the route. Like if you wanted to reroute an action.
So what are the curly braces then?
So curly braces are things that you're going to extract from the request URI.
Okay.
Brackets are things that you want the system to, to put into the route template for you, to fill in this gap with me for me for the name of the controller. So route values are things you're extracting. Route tokens are things you're going to put into the route template for you.
And is there just controller in action for square braces?
I think there may also be area. I think area may also be supported as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So if we save this, run it. We wanted our impartial third-party browser. This should still work, and it looks like it did. So we got the same idea.
All right.
All right, so that's attribute routing in Web API. We saw that, content negotiation was actually working. It was returning a XML when I asked for XML, return object. So I'm doing Web API and Web UI from the same framework. That's MVC6. I'm trying to think if there was one other thing.
What is produces?
Oh, produces. Yeah, let's talk about produces. So currently it's just saying I'm going to return XML if you ask for it. And Chrome did ask for it. But what if, sometimes I want to just return one format. Like I don't want to let the client dictate. Like I just want it to be JSON in one case, for example, or I only want it to be one of these formats, not all the formats that I've configured in my formatters, just maybe a subset of them, that type of
Right.
We can do that. So there's this new attribute called produces.
Is that method level, or is that
method level? Yeah.
Can you say to the controller level, just say this whole controller produces?
That'd
be nice.
That may work. I haven't tried
request.
it. Let me tell you. Yeah, experiment for home. Does produces work on the controller?
An exercise to the reader.
It should. So let's say I only want to produce application JSON.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now if I go back to here, I saved it.
Yeah.
And we refresh here. We're spinning. We get JSON.
And you didn't have to build. Again, just a reminder.
Yeah.
Even with your web APIs, it's just refresh, make a change, hit save, and refresh.
Now, I didn't change the accept header that Chrome sends. Like, Chrome still said, if you have XML, please give me XML.
Yep.
But the service author said, I don't care if they ask for XML. I really want to produce JSON. So this is nice if you want to keep that method signature that returns a strongly typed object, but you want to limit the set of formats that it's actually producing.
And I have total control. Like, if I wanted to say 123.json, does JSON and .xml does XML, any kind of thing I could imagine that within the RESTful scope, I could do any of this stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, those you could route yourself. The dot and the media type sort of shortened, shorthand format. That's something that in the Web API we handled with what were called media type mappings. MVC6, that concept actually isn't there as a first-class citizen yet, but it's one of the features that it's on our backlog is actually to have that like .xml, .json shorthands. It's kind of nice from within the browser where you only have a get verb.
Very cool. All right, well, we're going to come back in a few minutes, take a little bit of a meal break here, and we'll come back with Syed Hashimi in about an hour, I am told, from Gelman back there in the back. Yeah, we'll be back in about an hour, and we'll see you here at Microsoft Virtual Academy.
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for hanging out. Let's look at the next slide and learn about you.
Sure. Okay. So a little bit about me. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft working on web development tools. One of the big things that I'm working on right now is a new project